Hello everyone and welcome to another Middle Game episode with Coach P and masteryourchess.com. In this video, I want to go over some general rules that are very important in bishop versus knight games in the middle game. First of all, if you are the owner of the bishop, make sure your bishop is as active as possible by placing it on a free diagonal or creating an uncluttered diagonal if one doesn't already exist. Make sure the bishop is performing a key function together with the other pieces to achieve a clear goal. The battle is won more often when the troops work together. Next, steer things into an open endgame where there are pawns on both sides of the board, which will give the bishop a huge advantage over the knight. Don't allow the enemy knight to find its way to an advanced permanent support point, especially if it's on the opposite color of your bishop. Do your best to use your pawns and other pieces to take away all the advanced squares from the knight. Now, if you are the owner of the knight, what you want to do is close the position as much as possible without exchanging pawns because that will favor your knight. Steer things into an endgame where all the pawns are on one side of the board. This will amplify the knight's strength over the bishop due to its ability to attack both dark and light squares. Do your best to create a permanent advanced support point in the enemy's camp, preferably on the opposite color of the bishop, and get that knight on that square even if it takes several moves and it's not as easy to achieve. That will maximize the potential of the knight, sometimes even becoming more powerful than a rook. Then avoid being trapped by the enemy bishop. Always use extra caution when you have to move the knight to the edge of the board or in a corner. And in the end, I just want to mention that if you have two knights versus two bishops or versus a bishop and a knight, it would be a good idea to trade one of the knights because two knights don't usually work well together. So let's take a look at some of these strategies in play. This first position was reached in 1961 in a game played by Arthur Bisquier playing white against Bobby Fischer playing black. Black is up a pawn on the king side. However, because the pawns on the g file are doubled, that means black cannot create a passed pawn. All white has to do is push the pawn to g3, and whenever he's challenged on h4, he simply just doesn't need to take. If black takes the pawn on g3, he's simply going to take back, not allowing black to create a passed pawn. So the real battle, aside from the king position, which is also very important, it's going to be between the bishop versus the knight. Looking at this position, we could see that there's pawns on both sides of the board. So in theory, this should favor black because he has a bishop. However, this is not as easy as it seems. Right now, the knight is attacking the pawn on a7 and also has dreams of coming to d6, followed by the pawn from e3 to e4 and to e5 protecting the knight, where it would be impossible for black to win. The knight would be too strong. Fischer's first move immediately addresses that issue, so he played the bishop to d7. Coming back, if here black plays the move a6 attacking the knight and saving the pawn on a6, this will give black absolutely nothing because it creates another weakness on b6 and white can gain enough time to set up an optimal position. After this, the knight will probably retreat to d6, bishop to d7, king f2, g5, knight to c4, attacking the pawn on a6, forcing it to move to b5 as it cannot be protected. Now that limits the bishop. If you look at the activity of the bishop, he's stuck by his own pawns, limiting his activity. After this, knight to e5, bishop to c8, e4, king f8, king e3, king e7, king d4. And here, black cannot prevent white from penetrating on the queen side, attacking the bishop and the pawns, because after king to d6, knight f7 check, the king will have to retreat on e7, and then knight will win another pawn on g5, and here white is much better and is winning this game. So that's why here Bobby Fischer played the move bishop to d7. Now, if here white takes the pawn on a7, what's going to happen is that black will move the pawn to b5, and now the knight is trapped in the bishop's web, and he won't be able to get out. From here, white can play the move king f2, king f7, king e2, king to e7, king d3, king d6, king d4, then e5 check, king e4, g5, h3, king e6, king d3, king d5, and here black is totally winning. White cannot push the pawn to e4 because after that the king will simply move back to d6. And now if you look at the pawn structure that black has, the white king is totally blocked out. He's not able to attack any of those pawns. Black, all he needs to do is just go pick up the knight and then fight back from there. And if we come back and white is trying to maintain this position, let's say he's going to start something like g3. After like e4 check, king c3, h6, the king will eventually have to retreat, let's say king c2. Then black will simply push in with king to c4. And after he goes in deeper into the white's camp, he's going to be able to win the pawns and also win the game from here. Coming back from the beginning after bishop to d7, in the actual game, white did not take on a7. He moved the knight to d6 instead. And so from here, I'm going to just fast forward through the moves so you can see how black ended up winning this game. And here, white resigned. Our next example features two identical positions with one tiny difference. The white c-pawn stands on c4 in one and c2 in the other. The difference this makes to the assessment is enormous. This kind of structure would usually favor black in every phase of the game. The holes on b4 and d4 make the knight very valuable. And black would be very happy to trade his knight for white's dark square bishop so that white will lose the bishop pair advantage. After that, he's going to take advantage of the weaknesses on the dark squares via b4, c5, and d4. Clearly, this position is very nice for black. But what if we make a slight adjustment? Here we have the same position, but this time the c-pawn is on c2. Suddenly, white has all the chances, since the knight can be contained by the move c3. This move takes away the square b4 and d4 from the knight, and this is what we talked about in the past as an anti-knight strategy. Make sure that you understand this important concept, and whenever you need to make a decision if you should push the pawns forward, you want to make sure that you understand what squares you're going to give up. Remember, pawns can't move backwards, so every time they advance, potential control of squares is lost. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't march pawns up the board. Doing so gains space and often makes the pawn a dynamic part of the proceedings. But just be aware of the downsides that those will create. So let's take a look at this concept in our next game. This next game was played in 1966 by Bobby Fischer playing white versus Samuel Reshevsky playing black. The game started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez, a6, bishop a4, knight to f6, castle, bishop e7, rook to e1, and then here black played the move b5. Now, this perfectly reasonable move, which gains queen-size space and attacks white's bishop, is in the main line of the Ruy Lopez. But as good as it is, it does contain some potential flaws. Quite often, white will hit it with a2 to a4, when a capture on b5 opens the a file for the a1 rook, and also leaves the b5 pawn a bit loose. The other potential, even though it's rarely seen, flaw of this move is the c5 square. This pawn can't protect it anymore. That leaves the black d-pawn to perform babysitting duty of that square. And if it dares to move to d5 later in the game, then the c5 will suddenly become a gaping hole. From here, the game continued with bishop to b3, castle, c3, d6, h3, knight to d7, d4, knight b6, knight b to d2, e takes d4, c takes d4, d5, bishop c2, bishop e6, e5, queen d7, knight b3, bishop f5, and now an excellent move, bishop to g5. White wants total domination of the c5 square. Since the e7 bishop was protecting it, white hurries to exchange that bishop. So the game continued with rook f to e8, bishop takes e7, rook takes e7, rook to c1, and then knight to b4. And now if we look at this position, we could see that white has an advantage in space in the center. Black has a queenside pawn majority, but it's crippled since black cannot push the pawn to c5 as white dominates that square and will simply capture it. On the other hand, white's central and kingside pawn majority is very healthy. Later in the game, a potential f2 to f4 and f5 can be pushed, giving white a huge advantage. Black's unfortunate condition is caused by the fact that he settled for a backward c-pawn and a hole on c5. If he can't find a way to generate some play on his own, then he'll be in for a long night of suffering. I also want you to notice that the c5 is a hole, black's pawn can't cover it, while c4 isn't. Why? Because a later b2 to b3 will cover that square, not allowing black's knight or other pieces to go there. The game continued with knight to c5, bishop takes c2, and here white played an excellent move, queen to d2, attacking the bishop and the knight on b4 at the same time. Coming back, I do want to mention that white is also better even after rook takes c2, queen to f5, rook c to e2. However, queen to d2 here gains a lot more than Reshevsky intended to give. From here, the game continued with queen to e8, and then queen takes on b4. And now we could see the point of white's play. White took the knight on b4, we could have challenged the knight on c5, while the bishop that's on c2 cannot do that. And now that square, even if it's challenged by black's remaining knight on b6 and white will capture back, he will be able to put tremendous pressure on the pawn on c7. He could double or even triple up on that pawn, while black will have to defend it, and that will give white a huge advantage. And now the game continued with a5, queen to c3, bishop to g6, knight to h4. Even though the knight is on the rim, it's only there temporarily, but it does serve a useful purpose. That frees up the f-file for the pawn on f2 to be able to march forward. It also supports f5 for a potential pawn push to f5. After this, black replied with knight to a4, and then white replied with queen to b3. Black replied with knight takes c5, and then white took with the rook on c5, putting pressure on the c7 pawn. Black continued with pawn to c6 as it's protected by the queen. Rook e to c1, rook to e6, and then f4. Here black replied with f5, which is not a pretty move as he blocks in his bishop. However, any other play is also not helping. For example, coming back, if he would have played something like bishop to e4, after f5, rook to h6, f6, an excellent move. Here black has two options. Let's say he plays rook to h4. After this, queen to g3, attacking the rook and also threatening checkmate, will win the rook on the spot. After g6, white will simply take the rook and he's up in exchange, winning the game. Coming back, after f6, if black plays something like rook to c8, from here queen to g3, again threatening checkmate. If black responds with bishop to g6, blocking the path of the queen, after knight to f5, attacking the rook will retreat to h5, and after knight takes on g7, it's forking the queen and the rook, winning the exchange. Coming back, the other try is to move the pawn to g6, but even here, after knight to f3, let's say rook to h5, queen to f4, h6, and knight to d2, black is again busted. He's going to be able to win the bishop and also a pawn. He has central pawn majority and a much better game. Therefore, coming back, black replied with f5 here. The game continued with a4, b takes a4, queen takes a4, rook to b8, queen to a3, queen to d8, knight takes on g6, h takes g6, rook takes c6, rook takes c6, rook takes back, queen to h4, and here white replied with rook takes g6, king to h7, rook to g5, rook to b4, queen f3, king h6, g3, queen takes h3, and then queen to d5, where black resigned. Shevsky definitely didn't need to see rook takes b2, queen to e6 check, king h7, queen g6 check, and after king to g8, queen takes g7 checkmate. So as you saw in this game, even the most innocent pawn move can potentially weaken a square that could have devastating consequences in the game. So always think twice before moving a pawn to see what you're going to gain and what you're going to have to give up. If you liked my video, please subscribe and don't forget to check out my new website, masteryourchess.com, where you can learn, practice, test, and master your chess knowledge.